Your team fixed this problem 6 months ago. You held the meeting, you assigned the action items, you updated the process document, you closed out the ticket, and yet here it is again, sitting in your inbox, wearing a slightly different outfit. It's the same problem, but with a new date. If you've ever felt like your team spends more time fighting the same fires than building anything new, this episode is your intervention. Today, I'm handing you 5 root cause analysis tools and a framework for picking the right one at the right time. By the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to trace the problem back to its source and fix it so it stays fixed. No certifications required, no consulting engagement needed. These are tools that you can deploy on Monday morning. Welcome to Toby Talks. I'm Toby Hoy. If you're new here, this is the show where we take the things that no one teaches you about leadership, professional development, and process improvement and break them down into tools that you can start to use this week. Today, we're talking about root cause analysis. 3 simple words, but with massive impact and wildly underused. I was talking with a friend recently who leads an ops team at a mid-sized company. She mentioned, almost in passing, that they'd spent the last year dealing with the same customer complaint in different forms. Every single quarter, it surfaced again. And every single quarter, her team fixed it. And every single quarter, it came back. I asked her, kind of matter-of-factly, have you ever done a root cause analysis? She paused and said, we don't have time. We're too busy fixing things. And that sentiment right there is exactly what keeps organizations trapped. You don't have time not to do it. Every problem that you fix without understanding its cause is a problem that you'll end up fixing again and again and again. In this episode, we break that pattern. We're covering 5 tools, and I'll show you how each one works, when to use it, and when to skip it. We'll close out by going over why these tools collect dust in most organizations and exactly what to do about it. Picture a random Monday morning. Your team lead walks into your office, and there's a problem with the latest client deliverable. The data is just wrong. No 2 ways around it. It's just wrong. That report went out on Friday, and the client called over the weekend, not happy. Everyone on the team scrambles. 2 people get pulled off of their current work. They rebuild the entire data set, rerun the calculations, and reformat the report. A corrected version is out to the client by lunch. The client says, thank you. The team lead gets a nod from leadership for the fast turnaround. Crisis is apparently averted. Except nothing was averted. The crisis will be back because nobody asked the question that they should have asked in the first place, which is, why was the data wrong? Was it a formula error, a data source issue, a miscommunication, a training gap, a process gap? Long and short, nobody knows. The team spent all their energy on the fix and 0 energy on the cause. 3 weeks from now, the next report will go out with a different data error. There'll be the same scramble, the same hero, and the same nod. This is the cycle, and it eats organizations alive. To give this cycle a name, we'll call it firefighter mode. In this scenario, firefighting feels productive. You're moving fast and solving visible problems and getting thanked for it. By contrast, root cause analysis feels slow. It requires you to stop, ask questions, and sit with uncertainty before acting. It requires you to admit out loud that you don't know something. In most organizations, the firefighter gets promoted, and the detective gets told to hurry up. Now, stop and think about how backward that is. To keep going with the same analogy, the firefighter keeps the building standing today. The detective makes sure it doesn't catch fire tomorrow. Both roles matter, but only one creates lasting change. When firefighter mode becomes the norm in your organization, the best people spend their energy managing chaos instead of creating value. They burn out faster, lose motivation and start updating their resumes. Talented people don't want to spend their careers solving the same problem on a loop. And the organization develops something worse than a recurring problem. It develops tolerance. Tolerance for rework, tolerance for inefficiency, tolerance for the slow erosion of quality because, well, things have always been this way. For the rest of the quant nerds out there like me, here's what the math looks like. If a reoccurring problem takes your team 4 hours each time and surfaces twice a month, that total is 96 hours a year, which is nearly 2.5 full work weeks spent on one problem that you've never solved. If there are 5 recurring problems at this rate, that's 480 hours a year. 12 full work weeks of productivity out the window. This isn't a staffing problem. It's an analysis problem. Leadership's typical response to this is to hire more people because the team seems overwhelmed. But the reason they're overwhelmed isn't insufficient staffing. It's an insufficient analysis. New hires don't fix broken processes. They learn the broken processes. They inherit the firefighting culture, and the cycle continues, but with a bigger payroll. The firefighter trap doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as urgency, as responsiveness, as getting things done. By the time that you notice the pattern, your entire operational culture is built around managing problems instead of eliminating them. The shift happens when you separate 2 questions. Number 1, how do we fix this right now? And number 2, why did it happen in the first place? Both of those questions matter, but the second one prevents you from needing to answer the first one again. The next time someone brings you a problem and a fix, say, hey, that's a great fix. Now let's spend 20 minutes on why it happened. 20 whole minutes, not an entire day, not a 6-month initiative. 20 minutes of structured thinking with a tool. You don't walk into root cause analysis and wing it. So we'll start with the simplest one. And that simplest one is something called the 5 whys. It's the most well-known root cause analysis tool on the planet. Taiichi Ohno, who was the architect of the Toyota production system, made it famous. And it's also the most misused. The concept behind the 5 whys is you take a problem and ask why it happened, and then take that answer and ask why again. You repeat that process until you reach the underlying root. 5 isn't a hard and fast rule. Some causes will reveal themselves at 3. Some may need 7 or 8 or maybe more. The point of the exercise is to keep asking until you reach something that you haven't tried addressing before. Where teams typically go wrong with 5 whys falls into 3 distinct patterns. The first one is they stop too early. They hit an answer at the second or third why and act on it, and then the problem returns because they stopped 2 levels above the real root. Things like because communication broke down or because the process wasn't followed. Those aren't causes, they're categories, and they're too general to fix. This is the second mistake, which is accepting vague answers. And thirdly, teams run the exercise on the wrong problem statement. Things aren't going well isn't a starting point. Client retention dropped 30% in the third quarter compared to the second quarter. Now that is the starting point. The sharper your entry, the more accurate your chain is. One more is run this with the people who directly touch the problem. The person who runs the process, identifies the errors, and speaks with the customer, not the VP or the big wheel who sees a dashboard on a monthly basis. Proximity to the problem will produce better answers every day of the week. Let me tell you a story about a company that experienced this firsthand. To protect the innocent, we'll just refer to them as Sterling Associates. Sterling had a client retention problem. Over 18 months, they lost 12 of their 40 active clients. A significant amount of the firm's revenue walked out the door, and the pipeline wasn't filling fast enough to cover it. Sterling's leadership diagnosed the problem as the market is tightening. Clients are cutting budgets. It's industry-wide. Now, that diagnosis was convenient. It was comfortable. And it's also completely wrong. Two of Sterling's competitors in the same space were growing. Sterling was the only one who was shrinking. A mid-level ops manager named Dana decided to stop accepting the comfortable answer. She pulled exit interviews and account notes from the 3 most recent departures and ran a 5 whys on each. Here's the chain for Client X, their largest recent loss. The problem statement: Client X terminated their contract after 8 months. The first why: the work product didn't meet their expectations. As a side note, many teams will stop right there. Expectations weren't met. Let's improve quality. But improved quality isn't a root cause. It's a bumper sticker. Why didn't the work product meet expectations? The deliverables consistently missed the scope that the client described at the kickoff meeting. That was Dana's second why. The third why did they miss the scope? The project team was working from secondhand notes that were taken by a single account manager who attended the kickoff meeting alone. The fourth why in the chain: well, why was the account manager alone? The firm's standard process didn't require that the delivery team attend the kickoff meetings. And why was that for number 5? Because the process was designed when the firm had 5 clients and everyone sat in the same office. The account manager walked 10 feet to brief the delivery team in person. Nobody updated the process when the firm grew to 40 clients across 3 different time zones. That's 5 questions. It took her about 90 seconds. And the market explanation evaporated into thin air. The root cause wasn't the economy. It wasn't client budgets. It wasn't the quality of the consultants. It was a client onboarding process designed for a 5-person shop running unchecked inside of a 40-client operation. And that process was invisible because that's how we've always done it. Dana's recommendation was to require at least 1 delivery team member in every client kickoff. And she created a structured handoff document that was signed off on by both the account manager and the delivery lead. No signature on the form, no project start. That entire fix cost a grand total of $0. It was 1 process change, 1 template, and implementation took less than a week. Within 6 months, client retention stabilized. Not because the market improved, but because clients finally got what they asked for in the first meeting. Dana wasn't a consultant or a process improvement specialist. She was a mid-level ops manager who asked a better question than anyone above her on the org chart was willing to ask. You don't need a title to run a root cause analysis. All you need is curiosity and a willingness to follow the thread. She ran the same exercise on the other 2 departures. Different clients, different teams, and different account managers. The root cause was the same: the kickoff process, handoff gaps, and scope misalignment that was seeded in the very first meeting. 3 different symptoms with 1 root cause. Leadership had been looking at market data rather than their own onboarding flow for 18 months. The 5 whys only works when you treat each answer as its own hypothesis, not a conclusion. Each why is a door. Open it and look around. Then decide if you need to go deeper. Every answer to a why needs to pass 2 different filters. Filter number 1 is this answer observable? If I stood next to that process for a day, would I see it? If not, it's too abstract. Make it concrete. Filter number 2 is this answer actionable? Poor communication isn't a fix. A structured handoff document signed off on by both parties before the project start is a fix. It's specific, it's verifiable, and measurable within 1 cycle. Observable and actionable. Those are your tests. The 5 whys works best for problems with a single causal chain. When a problem has multiple contributing factors feeding into it from different directions, you're going to need a wider tool. The 5 whys is a depth tool. It follows one causal chain straight down. This is both its strength and its limitation. Some problems sit at the intersection of multiple contributing factors, and the 5 whys will only trace one of them. You solve that one and the problem improves, but it doesn't disappear because the other contributing factors are still running. When a problem has multiple contributing factors, you need to go wide before you go deep. There are two tools that do this really well: the Fishbone Diagram and the is not matrix. The Fishbone Diagram, also called the Ishikawa Diagram, named after the Japanese quality engineer who developed it, is a structured brainstorm, but with guardrails. You write the problem down at the head of a horizontal line. Then you draw diagonal branches, each representing a category of potential causes. The classic 6 categories: people, process, materials, equipment, environment, and measurement. Use the relevant ones to your problem and then skip the rest. Under each category, your team lists specific, observable, verifiable contributing factors to each. The structure of the fishbone requires you to think across dimensions rather than down a single path. And here's how it plays out in the real world. A manufacturing floor producing precision aerospace parts. Defect rate jumped from 2% to 7% over 2 months. Nothing had changed on paper. There were the same machines, the same operators, the same materials, and the same specs. The production manager ran a fishbone with her team. 4 people, 1 whiteboard, and it took 30 minutes. Under materials, they found that there had been a new supplier substituted for 1 alloy component. The specs on paper were identical, but real-world performance under heat treatment was different enough to affect the dimensional accuracy. Under equipment, they found that preventative maintenance on 2 of the CNC machines was 3 weeks overdue. The schedule had slipped during a rush order and had never recovered. Under people, we found that there were 2 experienced operators who had transferred to a different shift. Their replacements had less than a year of combined experience. They had completed the standardized training, but they hadn't yet developed the tactile sense for machine behavior that is built over years on the factory floor. In that example, there isn't a single factor that caused the jump from 2 to 7%. All 3 of them contributed and reinforced the others. The 5 whys would have followed one of those branches and then declared victory. The fishbone laid out all 3 on one diagram. The team addressed them in order of priority: materials first, then equipment maintenance, and then additional hands-on training for the new operators. The defect rate dropped back below 3% within a month, and below the 2% threshold within 3 months. W. Edwards Deming, the father of quality control, estimated that 94% of problems are caused by the system, not the individual worker. The fishbone helps you see the system, and the system is where the fix lives. Let me give you some practical tips for running a fishbone with your team. Number 1 is to keep the group small, 4 to 6 people, all who touch the problem directly. Any more than 6, and you get a brainstorm session without any direction. Fewer than 3, and oftentimes you'll miss perspectives. Number 2 is to designate a facilitator who doesn't contribute ideas. Their job is to enforce the category structure and keep the fishbone session from turning into a complaint fest. Number 3, set a time limit. 20 minutes to populate the branches, and then maybe another 10 to identify the top 3 contributors. 30 minutes in total. A common mistake that teams run into is they populate every branch and then walk out with 15 action items and accomplish none of them. The fishbone is a diagnostic tool, not an action plan. You use it to identify the top contributors and then apply the 5 whys to the most critical of those. To simplify it all, wide first, deep second, action third. After you've identified your top contributors, rank them by 2 criteria: the impact How much does this factor contribute to the problem? And controllability. How much influence or control does my team have over it? Start where both of those are high. Those are your quick wins. With high impact, low controllability factors require escalation or some form of cross-functional coordination. Address those next. We've covered 2 tools so far, and we're going to move on to, in my opinion, the most underrated tool in the entire toolkit, and that is the is-not matrix. It works by defining the boundaries of a problem before you investigate it. A simple grid with 4 rows: the what, the where, the when, and the how big, and 2 columns: is and is not. For each row, you fill in what the problem is and what it isn't. The contrast between the 2 columns is where the clues live. An example here is a SaaS company noticed a spike in customer churn. The CEO called an emergency meeting, and the room filled up with theories. Things like the pricing is too high, the product has bugs, support response times are slow, and a competitor launched something new. Before anyone acts, someone suggested building an is-not matrix. 20 minutes later, here's what they came up with. The what is: customer churn is concentrated among customers who onboarded in the last 90 days. The what is not: long-term customers haven't churned at elevated rates. The where is: was concentrated in the mid-tier pricing plan. The where is not: entry-level and enterprise plans were stable. The when is: the spike started in March. The when it was not is January and February were normal. In reviewing the matrix, the question sharpens immediately. What changed in March for mid-tier customers who onboarded recently? Finding out that the company launched a new mid-tier feature set in February. New customers experienced those features, but the onboarding flow hadn't been updated to teach them. Long-term customers figured it out on their own because they already knew the platform. New customers got confused, they felt unsupported, and then they left. The fix was a 3-page update to the mid-tier onboarding flow. Not pricing, not product bugs, not support turn times. 20 minutes of scoping out the problem saved weeks of time investigating the wrong variables. Here's the key distinction between the 3 tools we've covered so far. The 5 whys and the Fishbone are investigative tools. They help you find the cause. The is-not matrix is a scoping tool. It helps to define the problem before you investigate. The most common root cause analysis failure isn't using the wrong technique. It's investigating the wrong problem. If you adopt just one habit from this entire episode, make it this: before any root cause investigation, build an is-not matrix first, always. A good rule of thumb here is if the matrix doesn't surprise you at least once, you're not being specific enough. The surprises are the clues. The Fishbone shows you all the categories contributing to a problem. The is-not matrix shows you the boundaries of where the problem lives. Once you've gone wide, pick the most likely contributor and go deep with the 5 whys. Running a detailed investigation on the wrong cause is the most common mistake in root cause analysis. Wide first, deep second. The 3 tools that we've covered so far are qualitative. They help you think through the problems systematically. Now, let's talk about the quantitative side. If you've ever heard of the 80-20 rule, you already know Pareto analysis. Roughly 80% of your problems come from 20% of your causes. Find that 20 and you eliminate the majority of your pain. Named after Vilfredo Pareto, who observed in 1896 that 80% of Italian land was owned by 20% of the population. The principle shows up nearly everywhere: in quality management, customer complaints, software bugs, and sales revenue. The execution here is relatively simple. Collect data on problem occurrences over a defined period, categorized by cause or type, and then sorted by frequency, from highest to lowest. Plot that on a bar chart and add a cumulative percentage line. The causes stacked up on the left are your priority targets. This is another tool that's wildly underused because teams skip the data collection step. They think that they just know where the problems are. They trust their gut, and their gut is biased. It's biased toward the most recent problem, the loudest complaint, or the one that the CEO noticed. Let's walk through an example. A team had 5 recurring problem types. The team lead was convinced that problem C is the big one because it happened last week and the CEO mentioned it in a meeting. And now it's become the top priority. But the data tells a different story. Over the last quarter, problem A happened 3 times more often. It's quieter, less dramatic, and nobody sends Slack messages about it. But it burns more total hours and creates more customer friction. Without Pareto analysis, the team would spend 6 weeks solving problem C. We'll assume they succeed. Leadership is pleased, but 75% of the total problem volume is still running because problems A and B, the real drivers, were never addressed. Everyone followed the loudest signal instead of asking the data. Pareto removes the which problem do we tackle first from the debate table and puts it on the evidence table. Sometimes the problem that you're most emotionally invested in isn't the one creating the most damage. If your team isn't tracking issues in a structured way, this is your absolute first action item. A spreadsheet logging date, the issue type, the severity, and the resolution time gives you everything that Pareto needs. Within 30-ish days, you should have enough data to run your first analysis. Speaking of analysis, how do you run one? First step is to define your time window. You need 30 days minimum. 90 days is better. Pull your data, categorize each occurrence consistently. If more than 20% of your tickets say miscellaneous, you need to refine the categories before running the analysis. Count them all up by category and sort by highest to lowest. Calculate the cumulative percentages and draw the line where the cumulative percentage crosses 80%. Everything to the left of your line is your 20. You should update this at a minimum of quarterly. Your problem distribution shifts as you fix things. It's not a one-time exercise, it's a recurring diagnostic. Our 5th tool in the toolbox is fault tree analysis. It's more formal than the other tools, and it's best used for high-stakes environments where you need to understand not individual causes, but combinations of causes. It works backward from a failure event through 2 types of logical gates, an AND gate and an OR gate. An OR gate means that any one of the sub-events is sufficient to cause the failure. If any single one fails, the system goes down. An AND gate means that all sub-events must occur together for the failure to happen. All keys must be present. The gate type tells you what kind of defense that you'll need. If your server goes down due to a hardware failure, a software crash, or a network outage, you need defenses against all 3 of those. Any single one of them will take the system offline. Those are examples of OR gates. Examples of AND gates are if it goes down because the power supply fails and the backup generator fails. You already have a safeguard in the backup generator. Both of them must fail simultaneously. Your risk is lower, but if both fail, the consequence is total. Fault tree analysis shows you where your system has single points of failure, the OR gates with no redundancy, and where it has some built-in resilience, the AND gates requiring multiple simultaneous failures. This tool is heavier than the 5 whys or the fishbone. It takes longer, requires more precision, and it isn't the right tool for every problem. But when failure has catastrophic consequences, things like patient safety, system outages affecting thousands of users, safety-critical manufacturing, or financial transactions at scale, this is the tool with the rigor to match the stakes. To build one, write out your top event, the failure that you're trying to prevent, at the top of the page, and ask yourself or the team what events or conditions must occur for it to happen. Draw those out below and then connect them with the gate, the or the and repeat it for each sub-event. 2 levels deep is usually enough to expose your vulnerabilities. You'll start to see single points of failure and gates where one component is already unreliable. The best part is you don't need software for this. A whiteboard and an hour with the people who know the system well will change how you think about risk. Both Pareto and fault tree analysis share one principle: let the data lead the discussion. Your instincts are useful for forming an initial hypothesis, but without the data, you're guessing. And guessing with confidence isn't the same as knowing. Before every root cause investigation, ask yourself, what does the data say? Before you ask, what do we think is happening? You'll be surprised at how often those two answers diverge. We've covered all 5 tools, but I do want to point out that knowing the tools and using the tools are 2 different things. The tools themselves are the easy part. The 5 whys takes 5 minutes. The fishbone takes 30. The is not matrix takes another 20. And Pareto takes 10 once you have the data. The hard part is getting your team, your leadership, and your organization to use them consistently. Root cause analysis requires you to slow down when everything screams full speed ahead. It requires you to challenge comfortable expectations, to admit that the first fix didn't work, and look inward when it's easier to blame external factors. Most organizations resist all 4 of those. The culture problem shows up in predictable ways. First is meetings start with a let's find a quick fix instead of a let's understand what happened. Action wins out over understanding. The second, postmortems focus on who made the mistake instead of what allowed it. This turns the exercise into nothing but a blame session, and nobody volunteers for a blame session. Thirdly, teams skip the analysis because we don't have time. They do have time. They're choosing to spend it on the symptom as opposed to the cause. Fourth, leadership celebrates the fast fix and ignores the follow-up investigation. Whatever you celebrate is what you'll get more of. If you celebrate firefighting, you'll get more fires. And lastly, in 5th place, the one that no one ever talks about, is teams avoid root cause analysis because they're afraid of what they'll actually find. If the root cause points to a process designed by senior leadership, or a system purchased by the CTO, or a policy written by HR, the finding becomes politically uncomfortable, and uncomfortable findings get buried. I've watched teams run a legitimate 5 whys, arrive at a root cause, pointing to a leadership decision, and then rewrite the finding to something safer, something pointing at a lower level process that nobody senior cares about. When this happens, the analysis becomes theater at best. It follows the form, but not the function. The problem persists because the real cause was deemed too uncomfortable to name. If you want root cause analysis to work, and I mean really work, you need to create an environment where findings are welcomed regardless of where they point. If your team doesn't do root cause analysis, it's because you haven't made it the standard. Teams will follow what leadership models and rewards. If you praise the fast fix and skip the follow-up investigation, you're training your team to fight fires and ignore the source. You're creating the culture that you're complaining about. In other words, the fix starts with you. Add 1 line to your post-incident process. Root cause analysis is required before closing any recurring issue. That's non-negotiable. That's not a suggestion. It's a requirement. And then assign a deadline, 72 hours after the immediate fix is deployed. Review the results yourself. Show your team that you care about depth, not just speed. The first time someone runs a 5 whys and finds a real root cause, share it with the broader team. Celebrate the detective, not just the firefighter. Let me give you a couple of specific tactics to help embed this into your culture. Number 1 is the 48-hour rule. After any recurring problem, the team has 48 hours to deliver a 1-page root cause analysis. The problem statement, a 5 whys chain, root cause identified, and a fix proposed. Not a report, not a presentation, 1 page. Second tactic is a root cause wall. Whether it's physical or digital, create a visible space where completed analyses are posted. This normalizes the practice and creates some institutional memory. 6 months from now, when something similar surfaces, someone will say, hey, didn't we analyze something like this before? This saves you from having to reinvestigate a known root cause. Number 3 is the no blame postmortem. Remove any individual names from your postmortem format. Replace the who with the what. Instead of Sarah made an error in data entry, the finding becomes the data entry process lacked a verification step, allowing transposition errors to reach the client without review. That's the same finding and the same fix, but the frame shifts from blame to system improvement, and your team starts bringing problems forward instead of hiding them. And tactic number 4 is the monthly root cause review. 30 minutes once a month, reviewing root causes identified in the past 30 days. Look for patterns across different analyses. A single analysis will tell you about one problem. A monthly review of all of them tells you about your entire system. None of those 4 require budget approval or a new software. They require one thing: a leader who decides that this is how the team will operate from now on. And that leader is you. A quick recap on everything we've covered so far. Root cause analysis is a muscle, and it strengthens with use. Start off with the 5 whys. 5 minutes, no training required, and it fits on a sticky note. Run the first one with your team together. Pick a small, recent problem, walk through it out loud, and let people experience the moment when the 3rd or 4th why reveals something that nobody expected. Once they experience that moment, they're sold. Then introduce the is not matrix for scoping. It takes 10 minutes on the front end and saves hours on the back end. Then throw in the fishbone for multi-factor problems. Consider identifying one person who becomes your go-to facilitator. Give them practice with 2 or 3 sessions before a high-stakes one. Next is Pareto, when you have some data. Start tracking your issues today if you're not already doing it, so that you have enough to run your first analysis in 30 days. And finally, fault tree analysis for high-stakes systems. Save that one for situations where failures have severe consequences. Layer all these tools over months, not days. The first month is the hardest. Some people are going to resist. They'll say it takes too long, and they want to skip straight to the fix. Push through that. Your first 5 whys takes 20 minutes. Your 10th takes 5. Your 50th, you'll do it in your head without even realizing it. Within 6 months, your team will stop accepting the first answer. They'll start asking the why before the how. The problems consuming their energy will begin to disappear permanently. And that's not because your team got smarter. It's because they got more disciplined. And discipline beats intelligence every time. The tools work. They've worked for decades across nearly every industry. The question isn't whether they'll work. It's whether you'll build the discipline to use them. Pick one recurring problem this week, the one your team is the most tired of. Apply one tool. Follow the thread. Find the root cause and fix it for good. The problem you keep fixing isn't the problem that you need to solve. So go and find the real one. If this episode gave you something that you'll use on Monday, share it with someone on your team who needs to hear it. And here's your challenge for this week. Pick one recurring problem. Run a 5 whys on it. Write down the chain. Find the root cause and bring it to your next team meeting. Once you've done that, send me an email, toby@tobyhoy.com, and tell me what you found. I read every single message. The really good ones might end up in a future episode. For more tools just like this, head over to toby-talks.com. Every episode, every blog post, every resource I produce lives there. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Hit the notification bell on YouTube so that you don't miss the next one. As always, I'm Toby Hoy, and this has been Toby Talks. We'll see you in the next one.